Hello, beautiful people.
Hello.
Welcome to Journey Through the Interverse. Hi, Alexis. How are you?
Hello. Good. I'm doing okay. I'm doing the best that I can do today. How are you?
I'm on the same wavelength. We're on the same. I hope all of y'all are doing well. And it's a heavy day here in the United States. It's intense energy astrologically. And before we got on, I was saying to Alexis how it's interesting that we are talking about nightmares again today, post Halloween, of course, but now we're in November, which I tend to refer to November as the darkness of November, although this November thus far has already been quite unique. So we'll see what happens here in upstate New York. But I feel that it's interesting just thinking about what transpired over the past 24 hours. I feel a lot of people woke up to what they might perceive as a living nightmare. So it's just really interesting how these energies, come together in your dreaming life or just the things that you talk about, the way you perceive things. It's in the unconscious realm and it's also in the conscious realm, and things kind of blend into each other. And you're like, what is really real? What's reality? So, yeah, I feel a bit of that energy definitely very intensely today, just in the energy field.
Absolutely. And I agree with that. And I also, we were talking before about that collective energy. There's so much stress in the country right now. And, I'm feeling a type of way, but I feel like a lot of what I'm feeling is actually a collective feeling. Like I feel like it's not just my emotions, it's a giant group of people's emotions just kind of coming out. And, it's we got through it before, we're gonna get through it again, so whatever, but it's definitely intense.
Yeah. And that's another thing, speaking of that collective energy and feeling that we definitely always want to pay attention to our dreams, but see how your dream space changes. See how the way the energy is, like what's in the space in the field right now, see how or if that has some sort of influence on your dream, especially if you're in the United States. But honestly, on a global level, I know a lot of people in other parts of the world definitely tune into what's going on here in America. And so we're all connected. We're all humans. We're all inhabitants of this beautiful planet. And so it's natural for us to all feel and connect into that same core, that same center, and that same pain point. Even for those who, like, even if you're on opposing sides, we still have that common pain point. And that's a whole nother conversation. Another point, though, or insight, aha moment that I just had with Alexis before we went live is that recently I've been talking about Mars, or I'm sorry, not Mars, but the moon conjunct Pluto in Capricorn. And I don't think I talked about it here, but I've been talking about it on social media. And I got the dates wrong. And I thought it had already happened on yesterday, November 5th, but actually it's on November 7th, late afternoon. And so I'm really excited. I think Alexis, you're probably excited
I
too,
am.
what's coming forth in the dream space. And so again, pay attention to your dreams in the context of what is changing in the energy field, but also with the cosmic climate, the astrological energy. Like, really take note of that with this moon Pluto conjunction in Capricorn, because this is the last time moon will conjoin Pluto in Capricorn for our lifetime, as Pluto is going to move into Aquarius in a few weeks, and Pluto tends to stay in a sign for roughly 150 years. So this is like an epic moment for the dream space. If you guys are going to be listening to this after that conjunction happens, but nonetheless, reflect back to the dreams you've had. And just because it's already, has passed, you can still incubate a dream to get some sort of closure or deeper insight on what that conjunction, or even with the Pluto's transit in a Capricorn, might mean for you, because you're bringing some aspect of your life to completion. And we've talked a lot about Pluto on this or we've talked about it in our chats, and we'll definitely talk about it more. But I think it's really fitting that we are continue our conversations about nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to just recap the previous conversation on nightmares, where we talked about what nightmares are and how important it is for our healing journey. And in my opinion, I do feel that nightmares are probably the most transformative dreams. Like the experience is so intense, so vivid, and so potent by design, right? I do see our psyches like turning up the fear factor to be like, hey, like pay attention to this. Do not forget this. You will not forget this.
Yeah, with dreaming, it's like a gentle nudge, but with nightmares, it's a push right into what you need to face, what you've been repressing and what you've been ignoring coming up to the surface. And, it really, really needs to be taken care of.
So are there any points that you want to revisit that you made in the previous conversation as far as nightmares? And I can give you a moment to think about that. I have a few as well that I want to just point out that I thought was really helpful pertaining to the conversation of what was discussed.
Yeah, so one of the things that I thought was really interesting about our last conversation was the one of the book that I had been referencing mentions how there's no frightful dream, only a fearful dreamer. And I know I'm not getting that correct, but I think that's a really good analogy because another thing that they mention is like it's kind of like your dreams are dressed up in scary costumes, and it is a reflection of your inner self that really needs to be you know um, looked at and observed and really dissected, and so you can heal. I, Nightmares can be extremely traumatic. So I just want to preface this again by saying that, like, if you are having continuous nightmares and they are intense, feel free to speak to either of us about your dreams. Talk to your therapist, talk to your friends who are open to dream work. Sometimes sitting alone with these experiences can be a little more damaging if you don't really know how to break them down into the metaphors and symbolism that they really are. And sometimes they are just experiences you've had in the past in real life that were extremely traumatizing, and something that is really difficult to get past. Yeah, I just reach out to someone if you need, because these can be very intense.
Yeah. And if you do feel comfortable in doing the dream work, solo, or not necessarily solo, but if you feel comfortable diving deeper into the nightmare, I was also reading or referring to the book, The Art of Transforming Nightmares by Clare R. Johnson, PhD. And I really enjoy her questions and her techniques, her practices that she offers in the book. And one that I discussed last week was just going deeper with your dream self. And you can do this with any kind of dream aside from, say, a nightmare. It could be any dreams that you find yourself in, but really looking at and contemplating your dream self and how you are in the dream, like the characteristics of your dream self. How do you respond to the environments? Do you feel empowered in your dreams? Do you act from an empowered state? What are the dominant emotions in the dreams? There's so many different lenses and questions that you can really sit with and go through in reflection of just who it is that you are in the dream, especially when it comes to nightmares. Because again, like we said, nightmares are dreams that are very important, and in a sense, they're kind of urgent too. And you get in my opinion, the greatest growth from the nightmares. And so when you're able to go deep with the person that you are in the nightmare, that can really tell you a lot about how you are consciously or maybe unconsciously dealing or navigating the trauma that's coming forth, or the situation that's being presented in the nightmare that maybe you're not like showing up at like in your waking life, right? And you could experience it where they're complete opposites. Like I feel, for me, I feel really empowered in waking life, and I feel like I'm somewhat, I've gotten better at, you know, confrontational experiences. If I have to like confront someone or, you know, have a conversation, I feel really confident now to do that because I know that I come from a space of compassion and empathy. But in my dreaming self, as my dreaming self, I am kind of disempowered in a sense, especially in the nightmares. And we'll share a couple nightmares that we have had either recently or in the past. And that dreaming self is just a lot different than I perceive myself to be. So I know that there's some things that I have to work on and uncover. And yeah, so it's all, this is the shadow work, right? This is the dream work, is literally the shadow work, especially when you're working with nightmares.
Absolutely. I mean, like we said last week, you can you can do a variety of different techniques in the waking with your waking self to reach into your shadow and learn from and decipher messages, but your unconscious knows you the most, and those messages are going to come through so much stronger through your dream work. And that's integrating the dream work and nightmares into your waking life is going to integrate your shadow and life self. And it's a lot of work and it's not always fun. But you do find that empowerment the more you work into it, the more you, I mean, even like since we've been talking in February, even the empower, you say you're not as empowered in your unconscious, but just from February to now, you're way more empowered in your dreams than you were then. So like the progress, the more you work on it, the more it really comes to light, and you're able to, find that within yourself. I find that I have the opposite, where like in my waking life, I may not be as like easily, I'm not able to deal with conflict as easily. And I kind of, not that I'm not empowered, but there's just something that I'm missing.
Mm-hmm.
There's some bit of confidence or self-worth that's missing. And I'm getting better at it. But when it comes to my unconscious self, when I'm dreaming, my dreaming self is very much in control and in that power position. And even when I'm lucid in my dreams, and I'm not changing every little thing. Like I'm still observing, taking note, focusing, moving through it in the direction I want to move through it, acknowledging that I am dreaming. This is not waking life. I can get through it. And there's a power there for myself that is not as present in my waking.
Yeah.
And, that's part of the shadow work too, is merging it.
And I'm curious too. I'm just thinking of this experience of the difference. Like you're one person in the dream space, and then you're another person. As far as our levels of confidence and feeling empowered, we're another person in the waking life. And I come back to like what I'm coming to is that feeling of control or being in control. And in the dream space, especially if you are an avid lucid dreamer, you know, even though Alexis, I know you don't usually change much within, you know, the dream that you're lucid in, but the power is there. Like you are aware of your power in the dream space, where in waking life, a lot of us feel like we don't have control over the direction of our life in some way or another. And so I just think, I don't know, that just kind of came to mind. And it's interesting when I'm lucid, most of the time I'm changing the dream because it's like, oh, finally I have some control over like what I want to do, who I want to be with, and, you know, just anything. And so it's really interesting. Just that just popped into my mind in this moment. And so we'll have to revisit that at another time. Actually, we'll probably come back to it when I share my recent nightmare, and I'm doing the air quotes if you're listening. So if there's anyone watching us live, we invite you to leave some comments, share your perspectives, ask any questions. And if you're watching the replay or listening in on Spotify, please leave your comments, your thoughts, your questions in the comment section. We would definitely love to just hear what's coming up for you and your thoughts on what it is that we're discussing here. So moving into what we want to share for tonight, we're going to focus in on the common nightmare dreams and symbols that you might encounter, that people encounter. And so I'm just going to jump right out there to get the conversation started. I actually, Alexis, do you want to share first what, the dream, the nightmares that you had, as far as maybe like common nightmares, or just like diving into the symbolism of a current nightmare?
I'm
Or
good with you starting off. I'm good to go whenever you go ahead. You go ahead.
so if you've been listening to our chats for some time, Alexis and I feel we have dream magic together, because we will decide on a topic, or we'll talk about something, and one or both of us will have a dream in reference to what it is that we discuss, like pretty recent, like right, very like, close to the conversation. And so when we decided, the day that we decided to continue our conversation on nightmares, specifically common dreams and symbols, nightmare dreams and symbols, it was, I think we had this, like we confirmed this basically a couple hours before, like I went to bed. And I went to bed and I literally had a nightmare. Uh, it was a common dream symbol, common dream nightmare, and I was freaked out in the dream. Not so much when I got up, but I just laughed when I got up, because I was like, "Wow, we literally just talked about this." I went to bed, and here we are. And I will say, when it comes to my dream space, my dream residue, or day residue is what they call it, where like whatever happens in your day kind of filters into your dream space. That happens a lot with me, because I'm not the best at clearing my energy in my head when I'm going to bed. I might think about something else, like something nice actually, when I'm going to bed, but I don't like clear it. And for whatever reason, for me, it loves, like, it's all up in there, and it likes to present itself in the dream space. So sometimes it works out. And so I had a dream. I'm not going to like go into all the detail just for time, but basically I had a dream that I when I found myself, when I recalled the dream, or could remember, and actually I became lucid in this dream at one point, I was in my kitchen, and or I don't even know if I was in my kitchen, but I was in my home, and I was like moving my tongue around my mouth, and there was a part like in my mouth where a tooth was in waking life. I recently got this tooth removed, and this was actually, that tooth that I had removed in waking life was also the root of nightmares from a year ago, because I knew I had to get like an oral surgery and all this stuff. So anyways, so that's really interesting in that. But in the dream, that tooth was still there. It was breaking, and I was like kind of like moving it around with my tongue. And then I started pulling the bits of teeth that were coming out, and it was like yellow and black. It was really weird. Um, and I kind of freaked out in the dream, but in the dream, I also had that awareness. I was like, why is this happening? Because I already had this taken care of, right? And so then after that, I was like moving my tongue around my mouth, and my front tooth, one of my front teeth was really, really loose, to the point where like if I push it just really gently, even with my tongue, like not like moving slowly, it would completely fall out. And so I was freaking out about that. I went into the bathroom, and I was like kneeling on the floor for whatever reason, and just like sitting there, like, what am I going to do about this tooth, this loose tooth? And I look over to the window that's in my bathroom, and I realized in the dream that it was a different window than what's in my waking life, like bathroom in my waking life. And I was like, oh, I'm dreaming. And then I heard my daughter coming down the hallway, and I was like, in my head, I was like, I do not want to see her in my dreams, because for whatever reason, I was freaked out if she might be distorted, or there's going to be something weird. And I was like, I can't deal with that. I never saw her face, but she had asked for a glass of water, yada, yada, yada. I went to go get her ice for her water. And at the whole time, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do about this tooth, and if I'm going to call the dentist, and am I like, are people going to see me without a tooth? Like, I have to work, I got to show up on social media and in videos. And then her dad came in, and, I was kind of hiding it from him. We were having a regular conversation. And I woke up, like, the whole thing was like very anxiety driven. It wasn't necessarily a nightmare, but it was because, like, of course I'm concerned about my physical appearance. Like, I have to be on camera for work. And so that was the scary part. And when I woke up, I was like, thank goddess, this was a dream. And I immediately got on my phone and messaged Alexis. And it wasn't too late. It was like 1 a.m. So you're
Yeah, no,
still
it was, and I was just like hanging out. I was like, oh shit. That
right.
and that dream alone, like I have to say, one of my least favorite experiences as a human is losing your teeth as a child. I hate the feeling. I've always hated the feeling. It just felt it just gave me the ick to the max.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about it, I can feel with like my I don't know, I can feel the pieces wiggling around and falling out. I can feel the looseness and just like it's almost like a trauma response from being so uncomfortable with the experience as a child, like feeling it and just hating it.
Yeah.
And one of the aspects about losing teeth in dreams is like that lack of control. And I think that when you're a child and you lose your teeth, you don't have control over that. it
Yeah.
you have no
Yeah.
control.
And
You
it's
just
so
have to go through it.
yeah.
And like, oh, teeth falling out dreams are one of my least, I don't know if it's anybody's favorite, okay? But
Yeah.
it is one of my least favorite because I already know what it means. I already know that something in my life is stressful and I feel like I don't have control, or I feel like something old is breaking away in order to create space for new, but that breaking away is always so difficult and straining and stressful and even depressing at times. Like there's so much that goes with the teeth falling out, and it is definitely, every time I have that, I would say that's a nightmare.
And this is definitely one of those, like, this is a very common dream. And
Yep.
I haven't had one of these, I haven't had a teeth falling out dream in like years. So I thought it was also really funny that I was like, of course, this is the dream, but it was so on point. And you were on point too when I shared it with you. And you were like, is there something that you are not, are you not speaking up for yourself? Are you like, you need to have a conversation with someone, like what's going on? And it literally was like I went to bed thinking about the conversation that I needed to have with someone, and there was
Yeah.
a day around that. And so it was very literal, and that's like one of the main general meanings or interpretations of your teeth falling out in dreams is that, do you feel that you're not being heard, or do you have to like speak your
Mm-hmm.
truth for whatever reason you're having anxiety, or even about your physical appearance? Because that one was heavily like focus on my appearance. So I definitely, now that I'm thinking about it, I feel that there's something else there that I need to revisit and sit with. But at that very point, yes, it was like I went to bed like I gotta have a conversation with this person literally tomorrow as soon as possible. And so that was a really interesting one, and that was definitely a nightmare.
I think it's interesting too because you didn't just have one, like it's not like your teeth were like, I've had dreams where like, oh, my teeth are just falling out. Like there's no detail, there's no breaking away, they're just falling out of my gums. Like I can feel them sliding out of my gums. The way that your dream began was with the original tooth that you had to deal with last year back in your mouth crumbling and falling apart. And it's almost like the first part of that dream was like, I don't want to say PTSD, but it was a very stressful time for you, and it almost seemed like almost like a, a traumatic revisit of what you had to deal with exactly a year ago, and then shifted into the front tooth being where people see the most, because nobody's looking at the back of your
Yeah,
mouth. You can't
yeah.
see your
Right.
molars when you're
Oh yeah,
talking,
you're not getting away with
smiling,
that.
or anything like that. But so that shift from like that really real trauma based, this happened to you in one way or the next, right over to like, here's something that's going on right now and has nothing to do with your dental. So it's kind of interesting too, because you know sometimes your dreams really can be literally about your health.
Hmm.
So just the aspect of that, like trauma from the year prior, and then into a modern, not modern issue, but like a current issue, it's very interesting. You know, some people will have dreams about, you know, their teeth falling out, and they actually have to go to the dentist because their teeth is
Yeah.
going to die. Like one of their teeth is going
Well,
to
that's
die or
a
something
that's
like
a really good point because literally, and that's something we should share too. If you know, of course, if you're having any kind of health type dreams, you probably want to get it checked out just to rule that out,
that. Yes.
to be safe. And that was one of the things too. I woke up like after I was like sharing with you about the dream, and I also like looked at my calendar because I was like, I know I'm about to have like a routine dental appointment soon. Like I
Mm-hmm.
knew it was in December, and I think it was December 2nd. So I was like, okay, like I don't need to. I feel safe. Like I like my gut and my intuition was telling me it was more symbolic, but just in case, like I'm like I have a dental appointment coming up, like in it was pretty much a month away. So I was like, I don't feel, I'm not having any pain or anything. Also, that was the thing too, though. I was also having anxiety that day because my sinus, the cold that I had, the sinus pressure was really intense. And it was like right there, but like it was the achiness was at it felt like how pain travels. So it felt like
Yep.
it was on my gums, but I
Mm-hmm.
knew it was my sinus cavity, but I wasn't, the mind is like, but what if?
Yeah.
And so I went to bed. Also, I'm like, is this a toothache? Is it my sinuses? And mind you, or just, to follow that up, the next day I was fine. Like when the sinus pressure went away, I haven't had any issues with my gums. So yeah, I feel comfortable that it's symbolic, and I have a dental appointment in a couple weeks, so that's going to be ruled out regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Also, for deeper context, when I was in high school, was it high school? Yeah, my one of my teeth was chipped, like major. And so I had to get that. I had to get dental I've always had like dental things. So like I had to get that fixed, or kind of not necessarily implant, but whatever they do. So that was a thing for like a short period of time. So it's just really interesting when these dreams come up, and just there's so many layers, and that makes me want to think back to high school, even like what was coming up then, and if there's any connection. But yeah, it because it was so focused on like the physical appearance of things that took me back to, now that I'm thinking about it, it definitely took me back to high school. So
And it's interesting too, because especially knowing that you have a dental appointment already scheduled, there are anxieties about going to the dentist that, you know, don't come to fruition, but could, you know, especially if like you don't have dental care and you have to pay out of pocket for the work you get. And then you go to the dentist for your checkup and they tell you you have three cavities that need to be taken care of. Well, that's more money. And that alone can be so stressful. So not only that, but like just the idea of something being wrong and not knowing about it.
and that's true too, because in the dream, now remembering that was a part of the stress too. I did tell you that. I was like, oh yeah, and I was concerned if it was gonna, like, if my dental was gonna cover what I needed to get like that fixed. And I
Mm-hmm.
will say, last year when I was dealing with the tooth that's like has been removed, I had to pay for that out of pocket. It was like $900 or something like that. And so at the time last year, I was in trying to find an oral surgeon and everything like that would have went with my insurance, but I didn't find one in my whatever it is, like my network or whatever they call it. So I actually didn't get the surgery until March this year. But last year was when I was really going through it, trying to find, someone to help me and whatnot. And I'm in pain and all of that stuff. So it's really interesting. I'm like, I'm curious of why that, like, all of that was very relevant to the past, but then also it was like there was a lot that was relevant to that very moment. So
But that's a really, really good example of how symbols and dreams can have different meanings and metaphors attached to them. It's not just one thing. And that's why having these discussions is so important. And reading into dictionaries, even if it doesn't give you the answer directly, you have a way to get to the answer that feels the best for yourself.
yeah.
And like we can, like, the fact that we just got so many different underlying messages out from just that dream is that was a great example.
Yeah.
Your dream space
Like,
really
thank you,
did it for this
Pisces,
week.
right? Like, yes, coming through with the nightmare that I can handle. That was crazy, but it's like I'm on top of it. Like I got a dental appointment. It's not like a debilitating nightmare for me. So I'm
You're
like,
not
thank
in
you,
pain.
Goddess, being gentle. Okay. If you're gonna give me an example, like thank you for
Thank
being
you. I thank you. Yes.
yeah. So
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And like, it just shows how complex and profound our dreams and our nightmares can be and why it's so important to pay attention.
yeah. So, do you want to go ahead and share something of yours, or we can talk about
Sure.
dreams? Okay, cool.
So I'm going to share two very brief dreams. The first dream that I had that is a night. The first dream that I'm sharing is a very short nightmare, and I felt it was appropriate because it's very post-apocalyptic, and which is a very common nightmare to have. And just with the stress of everything going on and the collective energies, it adds up. So it's been about, I want to say maybe I had this between 2016 and 2020. And I was in the passenger seat of a truck, and my cousin was driving the truck, and we were going downwards. And I was looking around, and like the radio was cutting in and out, but it was telling us that it was the end of the world. Like we were all going to die, something along the lines of that.
Hmm.
And I am looking outside the windows and everything is on fire. Everything's ablaze. I'm watching like meteorites fall from the sky, flaming, blowing up into the ground, and just everything is a nightmare. And just totally it was horrifying. And the speed in which we were driving downwards was like 150. I was like panicking for a moment, but before I could even fully panic, I looked ahead and there was a bridge that was like collapsed and was just a wall. And we slammed directly into that. And then I woke up.
That's crazy.
And that, I mean, that was a scary dream. That was a horrifying dream. And for reference, when I was younger, post apocalyptic circumstances was a very strong fear of mine. Like, I mean, young, like I was like 10 to 15 when it was really at its worst. And I remember like constantly looking over the horizon and being riddled with anxiety and panic because I'm expecting like a tidal wave to come by. Like, I just expected the world to end all the time. And then I had a break where like I was alleviated from all of that fear of like this apocalyptic experience until like I want to say it was like 2017 or something like that. I don't remember exactly when it was, but when like we were really freaked out about North Korea like nuking us. And then it just kicked up at full ramp with my anxiety, full drive anxiety, like it was a bad time. But that dream definitely was like a combo of day residue, collective fear, in my opinion, um, and then my internal fears of feeling like there's no control, especially being in the passenger seat of the truck, going
Yeah.
speed so intense that I
Yeah. It's
can't.
like where's your life going? And it's like, yeah, into a
I
brick
mean,
wall.
even if I like it with the speed that we were going out of the truck, it's not like I could jump out of the truck. It's not like
Yeah.
I could have stopped the vehicle before we collided with this, massive like wall. I
Yeah.
couldn't stop any of the explosions or like I was completely out of control.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, you were moving so fast. It's like you couldn't like really get a hold of anything. And then it's like, boom, it's over, it's done. And in this book The Art of Transforming Nightmares, she points to the disaster or apocalypse nightmares. And I mean, she's very general and she does, mention that this is a generalization, obviously, like use your own interpretation. But she just, briefly just pointed to feeling overwhelmed during an extremely challenging time, which, makes sense if you are a young person and you don't know what's happening. Life is going so fast. You don't really know, like we don't have a lot of experience, in our early 20s or just in our teenage years. And so it's really hard to understand and comprehend what's happening. And then you also see things in media, whether it be like movies or actual news, that really dials up the fear factor. So you don't really know what to expect. And so it makes sense for our conscious, our psyche, to really go to those kind of like ways of visualizing or like expressing that energy and like, okay, so this is running through my head of like a possibility. So it shows up and you kind of like engage in that experience for whatever reason. And that's, that is tapping into the collective fear. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I think, I know in this book, I didn't really read deep into it, but she did mention as far as like collective dreams and nightmares, there were a lot of people like that she did consultations with that had a lot of virus type dreams during COVID-19, like the whole pandemic, where there was like these apocalyptic dreams about zombies and viruses. And I know I think it was last year or the year before, I don't quite remember, but there was like it was me, my daughter's father, and then someone else. We all had dreams about like being apocalypse and like having to like just like, I don't know, it was weird, but it was all within the same like 3 days of each other. Like I think my partner and I, it was like within the same night, but it was different perspectives. And so, and I remember there was something really sensitive going on within the country. And so it definitely makes a lot of sense that if naturally we're feeling the energy, like we've been talking about this at the beginning of this episode, where we just feel the anxiety, the fear that's in the energy field, like, it makes sense that that would show up in the dreams in some way. And I feel once you're more of an experienced dreamer, or when you're paying attention to your dreams, you can notice the difference.
You
Um, uh,
absolutely can.
because I think the same night that I think it was the same night I had this dream, or maybe a couple of nights later, and I had a series of dreams. There was one apocalyptic dream with zombies. But I vaguely remember it. And they weren't the like typical zombies, but I refer to them as the undead in my journal. So they weren't zombies, but they were like the undead.
Yeah,
So it was really interesting. So that, I mean, that's a popular dream nightmare.
absolutely. And I want to read what they have defined for, or at least explained for the end of the world or apocalypse in the book. And again, the book that I am referencing is called Nightmares: The Dark Side of Dreams and Dreaming by Stase Michaels. And I do love it. I mean, and not just because of the art. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see it. If not, it's like this beautiful purple book, and it's of a like almost like a old Renaissance painting of a woman sleeping, and it's just beautiful. But anyway, so the end of the world or the apocalypse. The end of the world is a play on words for major life changes, as in the end of life as you know it. Teenagers often dream about apocalypses. When parents divorce or relocate, teens experience disruptions that can feel earth-shattering. Apocalyptic dreams can also can oh God, I'm sorry. Apocalyptic dreams can mirror feeling forced into change beyond one's control, or changes or feelings that feel scary and overwhelming. And this adds up. I mean, we are going through constant changes in our lives, some more monumental than others. And it can feel really, really scary. It can feel really, really tough, and it can feel very lonely too. And it might be changes within yourself. It could be changes within your career, changes within your location, changes with friendships, relationships. There's so many different changes that we experience, and it really is the end of one chapter and moving on to the next. So I feel like that resonates really, really well um, with a lot of the dreams that I've had that are post-apocalyptic, because that dream was very specific. I would say that was definitely a nightmare. I have had a lot of dreams that weren't nightmares, that were post-apocalyptic, and they were very in line with changes in my life. And I think the thing that changed, the things that's different about that one that I had was I really was picking up on the collective fear. I feel like we really underestimate the energy of the collective fear. It can really affect us unconsciously as much as it does consciously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why we're like, pay attention to your dreams right now, because America's really going through it, and we're feeling it, I'm sure, on the global level, to a certain extent. So,
Absolutely. I mean, there's things going on everywhere.
oh yeah,
Everywhere. There's so
yeah.
many different, there's wars, there's just so much going on, and um it can get overwhelming for one person, especially when you want to make a difference but you don't have the ability to. I think that's something that a lot of us struggle with, especially being very empathetic. You want to make a difference, you want to see change for the better, but it's just takes more time than what we would like it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
So you have another dream that you want to,
Yes.
yeah.
So the next dream that I'm going to share, I had this in the beginning of the year. I want to say probably March or April.
Mm-hmm.
So I dreamt that I was in a spaceship with a few other people, and we entered into a room very, very long with a black pool that wasn't water, the size of the room almost. So the majority of the room was taken up by this black pool. Like it was the liquid was black, and I knew it wasn't water, but I didn't know what exactly it was. Um, People kept going in, but I knew that it was dangerous to be in longer than a few minutes. When I told them, they acted as though I hadn't said anything. So I was basically warning them, like, I know this substance is dangerous, and you need to get out. It's you're not, and they kind of were just ignoring, like I wasn't even saying anything, like I wasn't even there. So it was like I was invisible. Um, yeah, I was invisible to them. They kept dying and disappearing and then entering the door again to enter back into this pool.
Yeah, the
So
loop.
basically, they were making the same mistake over and over and over again into this pool of darkness.
Mm.
And there's a lot of different ways that we could interpret that. It could be me being resistant to change. So they're not actually doing anything wrong, but I'm perceiving it as wrong because I'm scared. I'm
Yeah.
afraid. It could be, feeling like I'm not being heard. If I have no voice, I'm not being heard in the waking life. Um, I mean, like if I have no voice in my dream or my nightmare, it could represent me in the waking life trying to communicate with people and them not listening or no change is being made. And then the void in itself, that black liquid, which I'm relating to like the void, I actually have dreams of the void quite often. They're a pretty significant dream symbol for me.
Yeah.
And I think it represents a lot of just the unknown. Sometimes it's fearful. Like in that dream, I was fearful of it, but most of the time, it's just like there. Like it's just I'm living with it.
Yeah, and in this book, Transforming, The Art of Transforming Nightmares, she briefly touched on the void type dreams as like they're very spiritual dreams, and like they can come across as nightmares, especially if you don't have experience with those kind of dreams and the way they show up, because it can be almost like what's the word, like existential, like especially the feeling, because of with the void, what I think about, it's kind of, it's literally everything and nothing, it's all encompassing. And depending where you are in your spiritual journey, your spiritual evolution, and even in your of course in your state of consciousness, like that might be emotionally overwhelming, and you might not really understand it, and that might come off, because of that factor of the unknown, it might come off like as an anxiety dream or a nightmare dream. But when you encounter those void spaces in the dreams, it's kind of like that opening to any kind of potential. It's the point of creation, right, where there anything is possible. And so it's really interesting to discover that in your dreams and to engage with that if you can. And so it's really interesting that the dream people in your specific dream were engaging with that and they were going in and coming back out. So while that could be, and I know your feeling towards that water, wasn't it kind of like, oh, that's like, what was your feeling? And I can't remember, or I can, but I can't put it into words. Your feeling of like the black
It
water.
just, to me, it was, I knew that it wasn't like, oh, I knew it wasn't water. It was almost like
Right.
almost like a portal, like a liquid portal. And
Mm,
I knew that they were going to die if they stayed in it. And like after a little while, they would die, they would disappear. And then the door behind me, the stairs that originally came in, they would come out of and go back in. And it was just cycles. And to me, I feel like that was an urge for me to not stay put. I feel like one of my struggles in life is I'll often get stuck. Like there's a strong resistance to move forward. And I'm seeing these people go through these cycles, and there's a big fear around change. And I feel like cycles are change. Cycles is changing. It's constantly changing. It's the death and the rebirth, and then the growing old, and then the death and the purgatory and rebirth and growing old. Like it's nonstop. And there's some resistance to that for myself. And I know spiritually, especially, I've had a really difficult time, a really difficult path with that. And this year in particular, I've been the most connected I've ever been, or at least the most connected I've been since I was a kid. Like, what's the word? Um, like aware. So
mm-hmm.
even though over the years I've been very active in my dream space, which now I consider to be like a form of divination, and it's mysterious, and there's a lot of, I've always been in that realm, but only when I was a very small child and up until like last year was I truly aware of the significance.
Mm-hmm.
So there is it takes a lot of time to shed your old beliefs and shed your previous experiences in yourself, shed your old self. And like I try to, one of the analogies I use is like you've already walked through the door and the door has closed, but you have a chain like attached to you, or a rope attached to you. So even though the door that behind you is closed, you're not moving forward. Like you've completed this phase, but you're not allowing yourself to move forward past that purgatory state and get to the next door. And I often struggle with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the first thing that came to mind was rebirth when I thought, like, after I asked, okay, what was that feeling there, or what they were, the people you saw them doing, jumping in, but you knew that that liquid was like, you're gonna die, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's a cycle of rebirth, and I can see how there's like a spiritual connection to that because of this like rebirth, reincarnation, going into the void, and the void, the darkness is like the end of life or death, because it's unknown, so we have no idea. And you step into that darkness and then you're born again, and that darkness can also be looked at as the womb of creation, in which, being born as a human, or that experience as a human, when you're a baby, you're in the womb and it's dark, right? And it's like
Mm-hmm.
liquid, so to speak. And so I see that it just came forth as like a rebirthing cycle. And I can see how that could be, again, really overwhelming, really existential if you're not in a place to process that, or if you're in a space in your waking life where you're feeling the nudge to stepping into unknown territory, but you're not really ready, or you don't feel, yeah, you don't want to take that leap, so to speak, leap of faith into that darkness, that dark abyss, because you don't know, like you could fail, and that could be like the death point.
Yeah.
I do like that cycle of like coming back again and then jumping in. So I felt like you kind of got a little bit of like divine insight of something that feels kind of spiritual, that feels like really spiritual to
I
me.
think so too. I definitely feel like it was a very spiritual experience. And there was an aspect of it of like, I want to go back to the not having a voice, not being heard, being invisible. There's something really terrifying about screaming and nobody turning around to even look at you. And, grow like I feel as though, or I know that when I've had many experiences where I needed help and I wasn't given, attention or, you know, um, patience or explanation for really, really basic things that I just couldn't understand. And in real life, it's a nightmare. And then when you have a nightmare about it, it's like
Mhm.
on another level, especially when you have the underlying fear of people losing their lives and not understanding why, they would take this route. And if I had more ability, like more lucid awareness in that dream, I may have been able to get them to talk to me about it. But
Mm-hmm.
like we've talked before, lucidity comes, it can be waves throughout the dream. So you may be able to do some things at one part and then lose your abilities a little bit through other parts, depending on where you're at. And with this, if I was able to at the time speak out and
It's
really get there,
you're jumping in there, like,
yeah,
because
exactly. Like, can
out,
you
like, what
just
did
explain to me what's going on? Because you're
before I
experiencing it
take that leap?
over and over and over again. And I want to know what's going on. If I was able to really get my voice out, and I feel like that's such an underestimated nightmare, is not being able to speak out and not being able to be heard.
Mhm. Well, that was one of the common nightmares I was presented in this book, that the paralysis. So that paralysis experience can come in so many different ways. And of course, we know
Yep.
it's a whole nother thing, but just having that paralysis experience in a dream where, like you mentioned, being like yelling out in your dream and no one hearing you, no one, speaking to you. And acknowledging you. And it's just like that could be existential in its own way. And that could be a
Yeah.
nightmare on, the way your psyche presents it and your connection, your emotional connection, and just your experience and possibly trauma with that. And that was one of her main interpretation for that paralysis, is that, is there, asking yourself in your waking life, is there something or some area of your life, or maybe a relationship where you feel like you don't get that emotional support, you maybe feel
Mm.
helpless, especially in the concept of those like apocalyptic dreams or collective dreams where there's things going on, in our collective world that we don't have any control over, and we feel like disempowered and helpless. Like you might experience that through the dream space and the sense of like paralysis, and that could be a really, really uncomfortable feeling if you can't move or can't speak, or you're not really acknowledged in the dream space.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because you mentioned your dream was teeth falling out. And one of the more significant dreams I had where my teeth were falling out, I was in it, like I walked into a dental office holding my mouth and the teeth that were coming out because it was like actively coming out. And I'm asking for help. And the people are kind of like talking. And every now and then, like a nurse would look back, kind of roll her eyes and go back to talking like there was nothing going on. And I'm bleeding out of my mouth, like pouring blood and pouring like teeth, because it
Oh,
wasn't like I just had like the 30 teeth in my mouth. It was like a never ending like cycle of my teeth falling out. It was just bleh.
it's like, but it's really good to kind of downplay them in a way. I really love what they presented in the book that you are referring to, your resource, where they said it's basically a dream dressed up in a scary costume. Like it's
Yes.
a dream. And I really love that because that's playful, it's not as intimidating, and I feel that you can approach it. And I mean, there's several different, we didn't get to touch on a lot of the common nightmares and symbols. I know recently I've had people share with me their dreams, their nightmares, and one person mentioned how they were being stabbed, or no, they didn't actually get stabbed, but someone was trying to stab them and they were able to get away, but it like sat with them. I mean, this dream sat with them for like days, if not weeks. There was another person who mentioned that there was a threatening person in the dream and another person, and they wanted to protect the other person, and then they ended up against their desire even in the dream, and definitely they would never do this in waking life, but they ended up like shooting and killing the person in the dream, and that was pretty intense. And I believe that is a recurring dream for them, like not often, but it's like they've had that dream before, those type of dreams before. And then one of our listeners shared on our previous video in a comment about how there was a monster, like a scary monster that will recur in their dreams, and then once that relationship ended with that person in waking life, they no longer dreamt about that monster and never appeared, and they were able to make that correlation of the monster to the person in waking life that the relationship ended with. So
Oh, your
there's,
psyche knows.
right, your psyche knows. It
Your
is
psyche knows.
like,
Oh,
let's get into the dreams. It's everything. Like the answers are there. Like, and you just have to, you got to do the work for it. You got to go deep.
you
And
have to do the work. And a lot of people, and I don't blame them, because we don't have a lot of direction towards looking inward. There's always looking outward, going to different sources and following that. But really, if you have questions, a lot of the answers you can get by looking inward, dealing with your own traumas, dealing with your own psyche, going through, the things that are uncomfortable. And, you know, dream work in itself it gives you a roadmap to get where you need to go.
Mhm.
And once you start learning how your dreams kind of translate the metaphor, or translate the messages through metaphors and symbols, it gets easier for you in your waking life.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. No, it's just, it literally, dream work has literally changed my life, and I will always remember the moment that I felt. I was feeling it for a while, but I was just like, I've been doing everything. Like I've been doing the rituals. I've been, just doing obviously the astrology, all the things that I'm doing in this waking space. I'm aligning my chakras. I'm like that stereotypical like spiritual person where I'm like doing all the things, and I'm like, but there's something there, and I just like can't really put my finger on it. And I knew, like, it came through very clearly. It's like you got to go to the dream space, like to
Yep.
get to that because I was even doing, there was a point where I was doing a lot of, which I was really comfortable doing, like trance meditations and stuff like that. But I can't really dive into that now because just being a mom, I don't feel comfortable. Like now, as she's getting older, I feel like I can get back into it at some point. But I was doing the deep meditations at nighttime, at least, and listening to like binaural beats and things with intention to, and I was listening to certain things to kind of reprogram my subconscious. But it was like, it felt like the reprogramming for me personally felt like I was like bypassing, where it's like, not saying it's always like that for everyone, but for me, I just felt that like before I go to that space of like, I'm going to restructure my consciousness, I have to like see what's in there. I got to go deep with it and peel back the layers, because there's a lot of myself that I don't understand. There's a lot of like repressed things. And I gotta just go. I gotta go deep. And Scorpio rising, it's not really hard thing to do, but it was just like, all right, I guess this is what we're doing now. And yeah,
But we're used to facing the deep, dark aspects of
yeah,
life
we're not gonna go deep. Yeah, it's
from the
like
beginning. we
life.
we go deep, so we go so deep when it comes to our Scorpio rising. It is a still black well
Yeah.
that's infinite. And at this point, we understand how to navigate through that.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's just, it's almost like it's infinite. You really understand the symbolism and the interpretation of the void of the black waters, where it literally contains everything. It's infinite. So if you want any answers and guidance, or you want healing, it just makes so much sense to like tap into consciousness, because I really feel like even, not to take it here because my Aquarius is starting to tune on now, but like just the levels, the planes of existence within consciousness and how that within itself is like the traveling in that you experience that in the dream space, because like once you're in the dream space and you're in that realm, like there's so many possibilities, there's so many
So many.
realms and so many places to explore. It's crazy and it'll blow your mind literally, and you're like, where was I last night? And I just think about
Yeah.
you, Alexis, like how you just like you wake up in other places, you're like, all right, this is where I'm journeying tonight.
Yep.
And I love that. I'm gonna give credit to Alexis in that teeth dream that I had. I was so proud in the dream that I recall, because I wanted to change the dream. And so I mentioned this, that when I lucid dream, I like to change the dream. And Alexis always talks about how usually, like most of the time when you're in a lucid dream, you just go with the flow. Like you explore from a lucid state, but you do feel that the dream has something to offer you and it's important, and that's why it's presented to you in that moment. And I recall that in the dream because I was like, oh, I hate this, I'm going to change it. And then I was like, oh wait, but Alexis always says like this is important. So I
I
wanted to hang out
love
with the
that.
dream for a bit, but then I woke up, so I didn't really get to dive deeper. But
No,
I
but the
said
fact
a
that you
lot.
had that thought, like, this is obviously an important message. This is uncomfortable, but let me sit in it for as long as I'm able to, at least, and figure out what it is my unconscious is trying to gift me when it comes to the message. I mean, I love that so much, and I appreciate you bringing that up because, like, it is something like there are people who are like, oh, well, you're not lucid dreaming if you're not changing it, and I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I know my experience. When I'm dreaming, I'm very aware that it is a dream, and I'm very aware that I'm making the conscious decision to travel down that road that my brain has already constructed. I can change the doors that I go through. I can change where, like, I can look at things. I'm observing things. I'm paying attention to
You can
details. I'm
talk to
taking
people
notes.
in your
I
dream.
talk to people. I do all the little things. What I'm not doing is changing the experience completely because there are messages that, I don't want to miss. And I feel like it's really important.
And I will say that I felt a feeling and a level of empowerment that I hadn't felt before in a dream when I made that decision. And I got really excited. And then when I woke up, I mean, the whole dream was kind of freaky. So when I woke up, I was like, but there was a part of when I recalled that part of the dream, I was like, ooh, like I felt progress within my lucid dream journey. And I
Oh,
haven't
that's huge progress.
time. So I was probably since like the summer. So I was really happy that I had that moment and then I made like a different choice.
I'm
So
so excited to see where, like, tonight's incubation goes.
I
I'm
know.
excited to see because that honestly, that's a huge, huge, huge milestone. And I give you so much credit because it takes a really long time to figure out exactly how you want to navigate through your lucidity.
Yeah.
Everybody has their own experiences, but being like so aware in your dream and being like, actually, I want to do this instead, and even though you woke up, that just the awareness is so huge. I'm so proud of
And that
you.
like I feel like that was a good statement to my psyche. Where it's like I trust you. I like I let's do this. Let's work together.
That's what it is. It's trust. It's trust that what you're experiencing is meant to be experienced, and the messages that are coming through are meant for you.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of everyone's dream space, is that it is uniquely yours. Like it's your feelings, your emotions, your experience with these different symbols, with these different dreams is going to be so unique to you, and your psyche knows you. It is you. And so it's perfect in that regard. And I love that so much. Whenever I think about that, I'm like, ah, like it just gets me. It's like finally there's something that gets you.
Yes, exactly,
There's
exactly. Nothing
so
gets you more than you, even if you don't know it consciously.
right? So I'm sure we've sold you all on the dream work if you haven't already been diving into the dream work, but you're listening to this podcast, so I'm sure you're curious, you know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, so
So
please reach out to us too. Like,
yeah,
If you have dreams you want to share on the podcast, if you want us to even like, whether it's anonymous or not, we can read the dream on the podcast, and we can each give our interpretation, work together to give an interpretation to help you kind of work through that. Or you can just do a personal one-on-one or two-on-one, not on live, with that interpretation, trying to help guide you towards, if not a solution, a understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I have created a ebook, like a little e-guide on creating your dream practice. So that's something that is also available too as a resource. Just throwing myself out there.
No,
Um,
please do.
experience. And I think for my last words for this episode and referring back to The Art of Transforming Nightmares, the book that I've been resourcing, what I really enjoy, as I mentioned, is that she gives a lot of practices in reference to just working with nightmares and sleep paralysis and bad dreams. And I'm not going to go through all of this, but she gives a really good what is it, 10 question practice for unwrapping your nightmare. And it's really, if you feel confident to sit with your nightmare, write it out, this is a really good next step to really address the nightmare. And she, like, for example, the first question is, who are you in your nightmare? Are you an observer? Are you an older or younger version of yourself, an animal, a different person, or you as you are today? Another good question is, if you could experience your nightmare again and change the ending, what would happen? Um, and so also another one I want to throw out there is, if you ask the most frightening or disturbing part of your nightmare, if it has a message for you, what might it say? So I'm excited to answer these questions for myself. I'm going to go through those questions with the tooth dream that I had, even though I feel very confident about the message, but I just want to see what else comes forth with the questions. And so again, I can't recommend this book enough. It's The Art of Transforming Nightmares, Harnessing the Creative and Healing Power of Bad Dreams, Sleep Paralysis and Recurring Nightmares by Clare R. Johnson, PhD. And it's just a really great resource with a ton of practices and questions for you to help support you if you are in a space where you can, really approach this on your own. And like, in addition to support, but yeah.
Of course.
So any last words that you want to share for us tonight before we end this chat?
I loved this two-parter of nightmares. I know that we're going to dive deeper into it in the future, because we can talk about this forever. It's dreaming is an endless topic, and each aspect of dreaming you can go so far into. But I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm excited for what we have next.
Yay. Yeah. So if you guys have any topic ideas, if you have any dream topics that you would like us to discuss, and also on astral travel, mysticism, because we definitely threw that into this whole umbrella of what we want to share here in this podcast, let us know what you're interested in and you would like us to hear, what you would like to hear us chat about. And we invite you to chat with us live in these recordings. And yeah, so definitely share with us that in the comments. So thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you.
Sweet dreams, and we will see you guys next time. Take care.
Bye.